This is the first tutorial in the Modeling 1 class where we're going to talk about the Maya interface. Everything you learn in this tutorial will be a precursor to the next tutorial that you will have as an in-class assignment, and that is to model a table. And the I'll bring up the image of that table and sort of at the end of this tutorial. And so for now, just what we're going to do is talk about the basics of the Maya interface, how to create basic geometry and how to edit geometry. Um, so we're not going to be really creating any shapes that mimic anything just yet. We're just going to, again, we're just going to sort of cover the Maya interface. Now, when you first open Maya, it looks a bit daunting because you have all these tabs and these buttons and all this other stuff. All I want you to be concerned with for now is that your dropdown, which allows you to switch the different parts of the Maya interface, is on polygons. And you can do that by just left clicking and going down the polygons if it's not default. And that you're familiar with where the create button is located, the mesh button, and the edit mesh. So let's start off by creating a very basic cube. So you go up to create, polygon primitives, cube. And then you left click on the grid, and as you can see here, it comes with some instructions. It says drag the base on the grid and then pull up for height. So the way you do that is you left click anywhere on here, and by holding down the left mouse button I can drag out the base of my cube. And once I release that, another dialog will pop up and it says drag up to set the height. Well, I'm moving my mouse up and nothing's happening. What they want you to do is left click again and it'll drag out the cube, the, the, the height of the cube. Now this is really great. But say I want to look at the different sides of my cube, or I want to rotate around this cube. Well, you can do that by holding the Alt mouse button down and left clicking. Now, say I feel like my cube is too high, it's too high, it's up too high to the edge of my image window. I can hold the Alt mouse button down and then left click, or I'm sorry, middle mouse click, and I can move my cube down and just sort of center it. Now, there's also different ways of looking at our cube. There's wireframe, which you're looking at here. So again, I'm holding the Alt mouse button down, the Alt and the left mouse button down. I'm sort of rotating around my cube, and I'm looking at it in wireframe mode. And say I want to see this in shaded mode, I can hit the 5 key on my keyboard, and what that'll do is gray out those areas in between my wireframe. Okay. Now, the way, as you can see, I just sort of zoomed in. The way you can kind of zoom in and out of a cube is I'm actually just scrolling my middle wheel in and out. Another way of doing that is by holding the Alt key down and the left mouse button and the middle wheel, and I can actually zoom in and out. Now, what we're going to be doing is using a cube in our next tutorial to kind of create the leg of our table. So some of the tools we're going to be doing is using is the Insert Edge Loop tool. Now, what that allows us to do is cut or add another subdivision in the center of our cube. So if you go to Edit Mesh up at the top and go down to Insert Edge Loop tool and you left click on that, you can actually click on any edge and you'll see, now I have the left mouse button held down and I'm moving my mouse up and down. You can see that there's a green dotted line. And the second I let go of that, it adds another edge around my cube. So if I hit 4 to double check, you can see it's there. Now, every geometric object is made up of these edges, like the one we added, vertices, and faces. So the way that we can edit each one of those options is, what I'm going to do is just click on my Move tool here, and I'm going to right click on my cube. And you can see that an option box popped up. So for example, this very first option, which is object mode, what that allowed me to do is actually select my entire cube and move it along this axis. If I want to rotate the object itself, I can left click on Rotate tool here, and I can rotate my cube. I'm going to hit Control Z to undo that rotation. If I feel like my cube is too big on my plane, or too wide, I can scale it in the width or the depth. Or I can click on my blue section and I can just scale down my cube altogether. Now if I want to edit the geometry of my cube, what I mean by that is the faces, the edges, or the vertices, I have to bring back up that menu. So I right click and I go to edge mode and I select this edge. And using those same tools that we just used to move, rotate, and scale our cube, I can actually select my move tool again and I can move this edge. Or say I feel like I need this edge to be moved out more, I can hold Alt and left click to rotate and I can move this edge out. Same thing with this one. I can click on it and move it. Now say I'd like this edge to be, I'd like to rotate this edge. I can go down to my rotate tool and rotate the edge like that. So I'm sort of just playing with or tweaking the geometry like clay. Okay. Now we just covered the edit or the mesh, or I'm sorry, the edit mesh insert edge loop tool, which again, if I click on this arrow or click on this edge down here, it'll add a vertical, or I can click up here. If I click on this edge on the side, it'll add a cut going across the side. Now say I want a little bit more control on what faces I cut. Well, there's a new tool in Maya 2012, which is the interactive split tool. And what that allows me to do is, you can see it adds an orange dot, and that's sort of indicating where I want my start of my cut to be, or where I want to place my first vertex. So say I want to cut on this face, and then cut across here. All I'm doing is left clicking on these different faces, and what it's doing is it's cutting up my cube. Okay, let me hit enter. You can see once I'm done, I've actually added a cut that goes all the way around my cube. Okay. Now again, remember you're going to be using all of these tools in the next tutorial, so it's best that when you're pausing this video periodically and you're playing with these tools. Okay. The next thing I'm going to do is introduce you to the extrude tool. So what that allows me to do is sort of extrude out faces. So if I right click and I go to face mode and I hold shift, you can see I'm selecting, or I'm sorry, control. I can sort of, let's get rid of our rotation by clicking on move. And so holding shift, I can actually select multiple faces. Now say I want to extrude all of this out. I'm going to go to edit mesh, go to the extrude tool. And this will sort of extrude out these faces. And I'm doing that by just kind of moving out on this face. I can also do it with this new slider, so you can see I can move this out and that'll let me control my thickness. I can offset that by shrinking these faces by going to offset. You can see that allowed me to shrink those individual faces. And I can actually add more cuts based on my extrusion. You can see it's adding more cuts along the extrusion, and that's with the division section, which is here. Okay. So let's sort of do a quick review and kind of introduce a few new things. So every polygon object, so I'm going to create a polygon primitive, a cube. Now every geometric object is made up of faces, which is here. It's made up of vertices, so anywhere two edges meet creates a vertice, which is this little purple guy here, and that could be moved, so can faces. And again, I'm just right clicking and holding down the right mouse button, going down to face. And anywhere where two vertices sort of are attached to each other, it creates an edge, which is here. You can see that. And if I want to create an edge, I can do something like grab my interactive split tool, and I can click on two verts, and then hit enter. You can see that created an edge in between those two vertices. I'm going to go ahead and just right click, make sure I'm in object mode, select this object we created and this guy, and just hit the delete key to get rid of them. I'm going to hold Alt and middle mouse click and just pan over. And let's just take a look at some other polygon primitives that we're going to be using. We're going to be using a sphere. So I'm just going to left click and drag out a sphere to create nails on our surface. So I'm going to right click, go down to face mode, and I can actually left click and drag out a big marquee. You can see that selects all the faces in front and behind. And I can press the delete key and delete those faces. And sort of that creates the top part of a nail. We're going to create a torus knot to create a handle. So you can see here torus. I'm going to left click. You can see that creates a torus if I just press enter. So we have our different torus in our sphere. And then we have a cylinder here. So something like this. And you can use this to create pop cans, you know, by just scaling that up and using some of those same cut tools, like the insert edge loop tool. We can cut, and using our scale tool, we can scale that out a little bit. So we can start to create, and you're going to, as you model more and more, you're going to be looking at things around you, and you're going to be looking at the very basic geometric shapes. Now, every great model is made up of really simple geometric shapes. You know, like a sphere is the earth, or a pop can is a cylinder or a cup. And so the same way that you would draw a portrait or draw a person or an object starting off with basic primitives is the same way you would model. So that's the end of this tutorial. In the next one, we're going to go ahead and start modeling out our table.